Shalom, Israel. Um, Before I do anything, I'd like to give all praise and honor to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Baha, Bakar, Kadash. Yeah. So today, the Spirit leapt on me to do a different kind of video today. So what it is, there was a bill that came out recently. So the elders of GMS, they brought it out, and my aunt Daniela brought it out as well. That's a bill that they call let me show you the bill. It's called, this is it here. Take a look. Yeah. So the bill itself is called the Illinois Safety Act. So the long name of it, because that's a shortened version of the name. So the long name of it is called the Illinois Safety, Accountability, Fairness, and Equity Today. So the abbreviation would be safety, right? So this act is like a hot topic in Israel, and a lot of brothers are speaking about it and breaking it down. So through the Spirit, I was going to break it down. I am going to break it down, so I'm going to do a part 2 to this video where I'm breaking that down. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to touch on people, brothers, Akim, that are pushing the word in truth and sincerity in the highways and byways, and often they get confronted with the law. A couple months ago, some good brothers of mine, Shalom Banyamia, so some good brothers of mine from the Rock of Yahushua, they got stopped by the police. They also got detained. Some other good brothers of mine, I always forget the names, but it's Iquab and I always forget the names. But it's Iquab, can't remember the other one. But they push the word in Seven Sisters, and also sometimes they come in Brixton, and also sometimes they go to Speakers' Corners. They were detained as well by the police. Some of the brothers from other camps have had incidences with the police, right? So what I want to do today is I want to deal with not how to prevent it, because it's Yahweh Ratazah, it's the Most High's will, but what is the legal parameters around pushing the word on the streets, right? Because I don't think a lot of us have really taken the time to actually look at the laws and look at the specific acts that relate to that. So that's what I want to deal with today. But first off, before I even do that, it's not going to be a lot of precepts today, Yashala. But before I do that, there's one precept that I want to bring out, which is Sirach, chapter 15 and verse 20 in the Apocrypha, and it reads, He have commanded no man to do wickedly. So this is in reference to the Most High Yahweh, Ba'asham Yahushai. So what this is saying is that Yahweh has given no man, obviously, no Hebrew, Israelite man, woman, and child, no man to do wickedly. Of course, he created the wicked to do wickedly, but no Hebrew, Israelite man, woman, and child to do wickedly. Neither have he given any man license to sin. So the reason why I brought that out, which is one of the few precepts I'm going to bring up, the reason why I brought that out is that no Hebrew Israelite has been given license, which means a permission to sin. And we know what sin is. Well, actually, let me bring that out. Everybody knows what it means, but I'm going to bring it out because this lesson there's not going to be much precept, so I might as well bring this one out as well. The definition of sin. So this is the book of 1 John chapter 3 verse 4. Whosoever, we know whosoever means whosoever, Hebrew, Israelite, man, woman, and child. That's basically what it means. Whosoever, Hebrew, Israelite, man, woman, and child, committeth sin, transgresseth also the law. For sin is a transgression of the law. So when the Apocrypha said that the Most High has given no Hebrew Israelite a license to sin, what it means that he's given no Hebrew Israelite a license or permission to break the law, statutes, and commandments. But after saying that, we actually are in captivity and we actually have to follow the laws of the land, so long as it's not leading to sin, right? So as a result of that, there's certain laws or conventions that most people in Europe are held to that standard. So one of them is called the European Convention on Human Rights. So what this document does, it gives allegedly human beings, but it gives people, I have to use colloquial terms, it gives people certain undeniable or inalienable rights, meaning they're rights that cannot be taken away except for very few particular instances. So let me read. I'm not gonna show you them. Usually I like to show, but I'm not gonna show you them because I've got quite a few to read. Actually, maybe I might show you them. But the thing is, everybody should download this and they should have a copy of this. So one of the things that upsets me, not just with Israel, but with Yashar, not just with Yashar Allah, but people in general. But of course, my main focus is with Israel. But what upsets me is that we're held to laws and we don't take the time to study the laws that we're held to, with the belief that if we don't know the law, it's not going to affect us. But it doesn't work like that. Because in this system, in Esau's system, ignorance of the law is no defense. So you going in a court or you being stopped by a police officer, not knowing the law is not going to help you. Actually, it's going to put you further under the bus. So, as a Hebrew Israelite, man, woman, and child, that's a true seeker, it should be your duty to know what it is that you're dealing with, right? So, yeah, I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to show it to you. Alright, so take a snapshot of that and let me read it. So this is Article 5 of the European Convention on Human Rights. So the first right you have is the right to liberty and security. So that's a right. So then it says, A, everyone has a right to liberty and security of persons. No one shall be deprived of his liberty, save in the following cases. So this is giving you the exemptions. And in accordance with a procedure prescribed by law, their law. A, the lawful detention of a person after conviction by a competent court. So what that's saying is, if you haven't been convicted in a court, you are not supposed to be detained. So that's a European Convention on Human Rights violation. B, the lawful arrest or detention of a person for non-compliance. So this is where we're getting into the technicalities now, because they will say you're not complying. So if you're not complying, they can detain you based on that, with a lawful order of a court. So which means they can't stop you on the road and say, oh, you're not complying, so I'm going to arrest you. They have to already have a subpoena or a court order on you in order to detain you, right? They can't just stop you and say, oh, you're not complying, I'm going to arrest you. That's not what this is saying. So if they do that, that's a European Convention of Human Rights violation as well. C, the lawful arrest or detention of a person affected for the purpose of bringing him before the competent legal authority on reasonable suspicion. So what this is doing now is using legal terminology to give authorities a power that they should not possess. So what this is saying is that they can detain you on a competent legal authority. So they haven't defined what competent legal authority is. So this is vague, right? Of having committed an offense or when it is reasonably considered necessary. So this is giving them too much power, right? So when I read this, and then I read this, because I intend to read this as well. This is the 1948 Declaration of Human Rights. This is giving you a very clear and well-defined right as a human being. This is giving you rights, but within the legal terminology of Esau, which actually gives you in one hand and takes away with the other. So this convention is not very good. But this is what the EU was holding. Right, so let me continue. D. The detention of a minor by lawful order for the purpose of educational supervision. So they've given themselves the authority to detain a minor for, according to what they say, educational supervision. Bearing in mind, this is what they did to the Indians, to the indigenous aborigines, the native Indians. This is what they did to the West Coast Africans. And this is also what they did in the Caribbean. And also what they did to the Australians. They take the children, they give themselves the right to take minors for educational purposes, meaning that they're programming them to think as Gawaiians think, and also to give up the laws, statutes, and commandments. So they've given themselves the authority to do that. F. The lawful arrest or detention of a person to prevent his effecting an unauthorized entry into the country. So basically, what they're saying is, if somebody's trying to sneak into the country, they have the right to detain them. But funnily enough, all the people that cross in the English Channel, this is not being applied to them. This is applied to our people when we come through in the airport or however we come through. They detain us, put us in Rwanda. They intended to take us to Jamaica, but Yahweh Ratazar, the Jamaican government, refused that deal. So they set up a holding center in Rwanda, and that's where they sent our people. Okay. Everyone who is arrested shall be informed promptly in a language which he understands. Right. Everyone arrested or detained in accordance with the provisions of this article should be brought promptly before a judge or other authorized by law to exercise judicial power. So what that means is that you should not be detained for a long period of time, i.e. a month, 6 months, a year. You're supposed to be detained for, I would say, no more than a week. So if you haven't been taken to if you've been detained and you haven't been taken to a court within a week, that is unfair detention, because they actually that becomes an imprisonment, because they've infringed on your right to freedom of movement and freedom of to exercise your rights as a human being. Article 6. In determination of the civil rights and obligations of any criminal charge against him, everyone is entitled to a fair and public hearing. Right. 2. Everyone charged with a criminal offense, listen to this, shall be presumed innocent until proven guilty according to law. So if you're presumed innocent, why are they arresting you and detaining you? Because the minute you've detained a person or arrested a person, that's a presumption of guilt. If somebody's innocent, why would you grab them up and lock them up? It presumes that they're guilty. So that's a violation of the European Convention on Human Rights as well. Right. Article 1, really quickly. So I'm just going to read the highlighted bits because it would be a bit too long. Article 1, obligation to respect human rights. Article 2, everyone's right to life shall be protected by law. No one shall be deprived of his life intentionally, save in the execution of a sentence of a court following his conviction of a crime for which this penalty is provided by law. Meaning that if the death penalty is what is determined to be the sentence of a court after you've been convicted of a crime, then they have the right to do that. But other than that, they don't have the right. So which means every time a Jake is shot dead by police, right, where they have not been convicted of the crime in a court and sentenced to the death penalty, that is a breach of a right to life, according to this law. Just listen to it. Page 2. Deprivation of life shall not be regarded as inflicted in contravention of this article. So now they're giving an exception. When it results from the use of force, listen to this, which is no more than absolutely necessary. So this is why the police officers, they tend to say, I was under threat. I felt threatened. The criminal was resisting, right? The alleged criminal was resisting. I thought he had a weapon. It appeared as if he was drawing something. So under those circumstances, according to this law, they can take you out, and they will take you out. Right. Article 3. So this is an important article. So this article, I'm going to show you something with this article. Article 3 and 4. Article 3 and 4. Can you see it? Now listen to this, because the wording is very clever, but it's also in the American Constitution. So I'm going to draw that out as well, because I'm just trying to show you how ignorance of the law is no defense. Being ignorant to the law is not going to help you. It's actually going to put you in a situation, right? So listen to this. Article 3. Prohibition of torture. No one shall be subjected to torture or to inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. So this basically is how we're treated anyway. So this law is redundant because they always treat us less than human. It's always been the case. Article 4, this is the point now. Prohibition of slavery and forced labor. So forced labor is when you have not agreed or consented to work, you are being forced or it's been made compulsory for you to work. So listen to the wording of this law. This is the law, by the way. Listen to this. 1. No one shall be held in slavery or servitude. So when it says no one shall be held in slavery and servitude, you have to remember that when these laws were initially created, our people were in slavery. The same thing with the American Constitution. Our people were in slavery, so we're not considered we're not considered one of the people. But be that as it may, it says no one shall be held in slavery or servitude. But listen to this, verse 2. No one shall be required to perform forced or compulsory labor. In other words, nobody should be able to force you to work. Listen to this, verse 3. For the purpose of this article, the term forced or compulsory labor, in other words, they're defining their own words. And this is something that even our people that are on the road pushing the truth, we have to define our words. We cannot allow people to define words for us. We have to define what we mean when we say something. Yeah? Listen to this. A. Any work required to be done in the ordinary course of detention, meaning you've been detained or arrested, listen to this, imposed according to the provisions of Article 5 of this convention, which we're not even in Article 5 yet, or during conditional release from such detention, meaning they've given you early release, or they might have you under house arrest, but at the same time they've given you conditions, and one of the conditions might be that you have to, for instance, do public service, go in the park and clean up the park, do 100 hours or whatever, but you're compelled to do it. You have to do it. So this is what they're saying. B. Any service of a military character. So in other words, once you join the military, it's as if you become not a slave, but you become bound to the military, and they can compel you, meaning order you, because if somebody orders you to do something, it's a compulsory, you don't have a choice. So that's why that exemption is there. Any service exacted, listen to this, any service exacted in case of an emergency or calamity, threatening the life or well-being of the community. So this one's important because there's something that I want Israel to know. Most of you should know this. If you don't know it by now, you should. So basically, once a country has declared a state of emergency or declared a war, right? And it doesn't have to be a physical war, because a cold war, the minute you say war, a cold war, war on drugs, war on gang crime, the minute you declare war and you declare an emergency, which is what a declaration is, you have automatically suspended what we call the laws of the land. They become suspended. So now you come into emergency laws and emergency powers. So when somebody says, oh, I have the right to do this and have the right to do that, that's not actually correct, because from, I think it was either 2001 or 2002, after 9/11, this country has declared a state of emergency, and we have been in various stages of a state of emergency since 2001 and 2 to date. They've never lifted it. So therefore, the original laws have never been brought back in. So they're still suspended. So actually there is no law, there's emergency powers, right? But be that as it may, let's go to Article 5, I believe it is. Right? Because what it is, we have to apply what the Bible tells us to do. So the Bible tells us to study to show thyself approved. Not just study the Bible, study everything that's applicable to us to show ourselves approved. Yeah? So Article 5, let me show you. And I urge everybody to download this and read it and study it, because it's going to affect you whether you know it or not, or whether you understand it or not. So you need to know it. Article 5, right to liberty and security. So now we're getting into the rights that we are supposed to have as human beings, or as alleged citizens or nationals of the country, or whatever country that we're in our captivity. These are the alleged rights that we're supposed to have, right? So we're supposed to have, let me read it. Everyone has the right to liberty and security of person. No one shall be deprived of his liberty, save in the following cases. So yet again, they've given you a right, and then they're telling you where they can take away the circumstances where they can take away those rights. Because Esau and the Goyim, they're very crafty. So everything they do it in a way to disenfranchise whoever they need to, which in this instance is going to be Yashala. A. The lawful detention of a person after conviction by a competent court. So what that's saying is that if you've been detained and convicted in a court, they have the right to take away your liberty and security. But what it's not saying is that if you haven't been convicted in a court, they don't have the right to, but they give themselves that right. B. The lawful arrest or detention of a person by non-compliance. You see the compliance thing again? With the lawful order of a court. So non-compliance, we have to understand what non-compliance means, because the way that the feds use that term is when they come and whatever they order you to do or whatever they ask you to do, if you do not do it, they start using the phrase non-compliant, you're not being compliant. But this is not the definition of non-compliance. Non-compliance, according to the European Convention of Human Rights, is when a court has ordered an officer or a legal authority to detain you. So that would be a warrant or subpoena, and you're not complying with that legal order. That's what non-compliance is, but that's not the way it's used on the road. On the road, they say, what's your name? You don't want to answer, they say you're not complying. That's not what the definition is. And this is also the reason why you need to download and have a copy of it on you when you're pushing the word, because I do. Because if they roll up on me, I'm pulling out the documents on camera, and I'm going to quote them as well. Um, D. The detention of a minor by lawful order for the. Oh, I've read that already. I think I've read that already. Yeah, listen to this one. The lawful detention of persons for the prevention, listen to this, of the spreading of infectious diseases. So, the funny thing about this is, the cold is an infectious disease, meaning you can spread a cold. Not so? The video was an infectious disease which you could spread. So this is giving them the power to detain you because they can say you're at risk of spreading it. Listen to this. They also have the authority, according to this, to detain persons of unsound mind. So when they say unsound mind, what does that mean? Unsound mind doesn't mean that you are loony or you're, cuckoo. Unsound mind means that you think or your actions based on your thoughts is different from the general population. So based on that definition, if you understand what I don't want to say it, but understand where this is going. So who determines if you're on sound mind, and what is the criteria they use? The criteria will be you're acting different, you have a different belief, you're doing things contrary to what everybody's doing. So they have within their law the power, according to them, to detain you if they exercise this authority. Another one again, listen to this. Alcoholics. So they have the power to detain an alcoholic, right? Drug addicts. They don't use that power. They should, but they don't. But listen to this one. Or vagrants. So this power is actually stems from, I think it was initially um, signed by Robert Peel in the Victoria era, which is near enough 200 years ago, where they gave themselves the power to detain a person who is not working, and they would put them in a poorhouse, which is basically a prison. So what this is showing you is that nothing has changed. They just changed the wording of it, but how it's actually applied would be the same way. Because if they determine that you're not living anywhere and you're not working anywhere, they have the power to detain you, i.e., arrest you and keep you in a prison. And that would not be seen as breaching your rights. Let's see if there's anything else. Yeah, it says that you could sue. Yeah, right to a fair trial. So I can't see how a Jake can get a fair trial, because a fair trial implies that you've been in front of a jury of your peers, and in my case, my peer would be somebody that has my same age, because if you're not around my age group, you're not my peer. If you're older than me, you're not my peer. So peer is another word to say equal or equivalent. So my peer would be around my age group, would be around my gender, because if you're not my gender, in other words, if you're a woman, you're not my peer. How can you be a woman and be my peer? You're not my peer. You can't understand what I go through because you are a woman, just like I can't understand what a woman goes through. That's number two. Number three, you have to have my same educational background. Why? Because based on your educational background, or based on the way you view things, is the way that you understand and interpret things. So for somebody to judge me, they have to be able to think like me. That's the whole point. That's why they said pairs. And on top of that, you have to have also lived I'm just using myself as an example. You have to have lived in 3 different continents. Because when you live in a place for a period of time, that also affects the way you think and the way you act as well. So if you haven't lived in 3 different continents, if you don't have the same educational background I have, if you don't have the same gender I have and the age I have, how can you judge me in a court? Because you are not going to understand where I'm coming from. So we could never get a fair trial because most of the jury is going to, if it's a Jake, it's going to be Aishawa, Adawam, right? Predominantly women, because women tend to judge us harsher, so they throw women in there, and it's going to be different age groups. So the younger generation, they have a whole different way of viewing things. They don't look at things the way we look at things, and they don't understand things the way we understand things, right? So I'm just using myself an example. So this is proof that we can never get a fair trial. So that's another breach of their constitution, not constitution, their convention on human rights. Right. So let's get into it. Right. So listen to this. So this one, I like this one. You know why I like this one? Because I've already defined something, and this, if you read it, right, so see it? Right. Listen to this. Article 7, no punishment without law. But guess what? From 2002 to now, they suspended law. So what we have is emergency powers and an illusion of law, but in actuality, there's no law. So if there's no law, there shouldn't be any punishment. But be that as it may, let's read what they say. No one shall be held guilty of any criminal offense on account of any act or omission which did not constitute a criminal offense. So in other words, if you did something and then next week they passed a law that said that's now illegal, they can't then take you to court based on the fact that they witnessed you do that thing the week before. Because at the time you did it, it wasn't an offense. That's what this is saying, right? So this basically is saying, like what we say in the truth. If it's not in the Hathawah Ra, then you haven't done anything wrong. Because our legal system, our constitution, is in the Hathawah Ra and in the Tanakh, which is the rest, which is the prophets, to the law and to the testimony. That's what we go to. But if it's not in that, then we haven't done anything wrong. So this is what they're saying as well. Article 8, right to respect for private and family life. Listen to this. Article 9. So this is a right that you have. Well, you don't have any rights because the law is suspended. But according to this, this is a right we're supposed to have. Freedom of thought. So because we push a different doctrine to whatever everybody else is pushing, you can't hold that against us because we have the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. So you can't impose a religious doctrine on us or try to say that, oh, you lot are rebels or you lot are pushing a strange doctrine, right? It doesn't matter if we're pushing a strange doctrine. We have the right to do so, right? And your laws states that we have the right to do so, right? Let me see if there's anything else. Right, Article 14, prohibition of discrimination. Yeah, this is a good one as well. Look at it. Look at that. Snap it. I'll read it out. The enjoyment of the rights and freedoms set forth in this convention shall be secured without discrimination. So it's not based on your age, your gender, your color, how much money you got, how clever you are, how unclever you are. It's not based on that. So long as you're existing as a so-called human being, this right you have, right? So I'm going to list out what the rights are. Religion, political, or other opinion. So other opinion would be a contrary opinion. So our opinion is contrary to other people's opinion. They try to shut us down. Even the internet tries to do that, the algorithm. But be that as it may, we have a legal right, according to their laws, we have a legal right to do that, to express, a freedom of expression, right? Article 15. Yeah, so this one, I put a note on this one. So this one, I want you to look at it carefully. This is with the notes, right? And this is the reason why it is important for you to have a legal dictionary. Because if you go in a regular dictionary, that definition does not apply in a court of law. So you can't go in a court of law with a Webster dictionary or any of those dictionaries because the word's going to have a different meaning. This is the legal definition, i.e., what the lawyers mean when you're in court, or what the judge means when you're in court. So this is the one, or Bobby is the one you have to use. So I'm going to read it out, and I wrote down the definition from here, just for speed. Article 15, derogation in time of emergency. So derogation is one of those words they use to hide or withhold information, because if you hear derogation, you're not going to understand what it means, right? So I got the legal definition and I wrote it down, so I'm going to explain it now. To abrogate. So even abrogate has to be defined as well, because that's not a general word that we use. So abrogate means to abolish. So derogation in time of emergency means abolish in times of emergency, which is they abolish the law in a time of emergency. But see how they code it? You would never understand that from this. So let me read it. In time of war or other public emergency, i.e., a code with a video, right? You should know what that means. Threatening the life of the nation, any high contracting party. So this term is a funny term because a high contracting party doesn't just mean a government. It doesn't just mean a king. It means any entity, i.e. a corporation, i.e. whatever, any high entity, i.e. the Pope, high entity, high contracting party may take measures derogating, abolishing from its obligations under this convention. So basically, this article has listed out what I told you. From 2002, when it was declared a state of emergency, they abolished all their obligations under this and also under this. Right? Whether you know it or not, I'm telling you. Right? Right. Anything else? Yes. Article 10. Freedom of expression. Everyone has the right to freedom of expression. So if we express our understanding of the Bible on the highway and somebody challenges us, rather than trying to go back and forth with them, that's our right. So actually, if somebody's trying to stop us from expressing our right, they're the ones that are breaking our human rights. We're not wrong for expressing our opinion. They're wrong for trying to stop us for expressing our opinion, according to this act. Freedom of assembly. That's another one. So my brothers that what is it? I think it's Rock of Yahweh Shai. I don't want to put the brothers out there. I love you brothers, but when I witnessed the account on the video, this is what was going through my mind because I read these things. So I'm thinking like, you have the freedom of assembly, Article 11. You have the freedom of assembly and association. Everyone has the right to freedom of peaceable assembly and to freedom of association with others, which is what you guys were doing on the Sabbath, including the right to form and to join trade unions. That's something else, but it's also your right. And in verse 2, it says, no restriction shall be placed on the exercise of these rights. So what the feds did was restricted you exercising your right. But they can do that because laws have been suspended, or in the legal term, derogated or abrogated. So there is no laws. There actually isn't any laws, believe it or not. There's emergency powers, and that's what they've been using on us. So, right, boom. Prohibition of abuse of rights. So let me show you that. Article 17. Right. Nothing in this convention may be interpreted as implying for any state, group, or person any right to engage in any activity or perform any act aimed at the destruction of any of the rights and freedom set forth with. So the funny thing is, one of the legal concepts that most people don't really wrap their head around is that the law is not a respect of persons. Bearing in mind the laws that govern this country is actually based on Roman laws, and the Romans, i.e. the Edomites, the Herodians and so on, they got those laws from the law, statutes and commandments, believe it or not. But they just, how to put it, they usurped it. Because remember when King James, or when the Dark Ages was in place, even though some of the jakes were going way off, they still were basing their laws on the law, statutes, and commandments. So one of them is that the Most High is not a respecter of persons. So that concept has filtered into the judicial process, right? Yeah, did I read it? Yes, I did. Let's go. Because I have to read the other one as well. And I think I read the most important ones dealing with, because it's the right to freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of religion, freedom of thought. So I believe I read all of those. Let me see. Protection of property. Yeah. So I'm going to show you this one for one particular reason, because I'm showing you the technology of Esau. So this is why. Because I highlighted one. You see it? Right. So it's in the protocol, right? Article 1, protection of property. Listen to the wording. Every natural or legal person. So do you know what this is saying? You know what a natural person is? A natural person is a human being that was procreated through a man and a woman, through the normal process of procreation. Of course, Yahweh is his will as well, because he releases spirit as well. So that's a natural person. An unnatural person would be a person that was conceived not through the natural process. So there's people that were conceived not through the natural process, i.e., gene manipulation, gene editing. That would be unnatural, right? But also legal person. So a legal person is not a human being. A legal person is a corporation or organization or company. So they've attached human rights onto corporations, and they're seen as legal persons, right? So I just explain that just to show you how wicked. Oh, here we go. So this is the freedom of movement one. I don't think I showed this, so let me show it. Right. So this is protocol number 4, article 1. Prohibition of imprisonment for debt. Right? So according to law, you're not supposed to arrest and detain a person for debt, for owing. That's against the law. Right. Article 2, freedom of movement. So this is going into what the police are often doing to our brothers when we're on the road pushing the word, right? Everyone lawfully within the territory of a state shall, within that territory, have the right to liberty of movement and freedom to choose his residence, right? I think that's it. Yeah, think that's it in this one. Let me check. Alright. So this one basically was the convention that Britain signed into when they joined EU. Because what happened was Europe have their own convention of human rights, which is not as, how to put it, is not as clear and well defined as the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights. So it's more vague, so it allows them to be able to wiggle through certain things and be able to do things that legally or lawfully they should not be able to do. So what happened is, when Britain opted out of EU, it also opted out of this, but it's still, some of it is still being implemented. That's why I read it. So now this is the Salakia, this is the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948. So this was signed after World War II. And all of the signatory nations, Britain being one of them, right, have actually signed into this as law. So even though when they joined Europe, they were following this, actually this is the law. And what they have to do by law is they're supposed to put this in public places. They're supposed to teach this in schools, right? So I went to school in this country when I was a child, grew up in Trinity, came back, went to school again. I never learned this. I've never seen this in a school. But this document, within the document, it states that it's supposed to be taught in schools, it's supposed to be placed in public places, it's supposed to be commonly known. Right? So let me read it now. So this one is not as long as that one. Alright, so let me read it. So I'm just gonna go straight to the chase. I'm gonna beat around the bush. Beat around the bushes. Alright. Actually, let me read the preamble. Right? Let me read the preamble. Right. To the preamble, whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable right. So an inalienable right is a right that you cannot take away. So it doesn't matter if you're rich, if you're poor, if you committed a crime or not, you know, your particular shade of brown or not, it doesn't matter. These rights go across the board. So anytime a person breaches these rights, that is defined as a human rights violation. That's the definition of it. And it could be a police officer as well, because a police officer or officer of the law, he does not have the right to break your rights, right? Because the Most High is not a respecter of person. So if a law is applicable to me, it's also applicable to an officer. If I cannot park on a red line, an officer cannot park on a red line. If I cannot drive 60 miles an hour in a 50-mile-an-hour zone, the officer cannot drive 60 because he's breaking the law as well. Because what did the scripture say? The Most High does not give license to sin, i.e. to break the law. And their law is based on the Torah. So the principle should remain. So listen to this now. Whereas, and that was demonstrated with Yahushua when Yahushua saved the lady that was caught. I think she had transgressed the law of adultery or something like that. And then he said, let them without sin cast the first stone. And they all left through the Spirit because he convicted them of the Spirit. Because it's the same principle. How could you convict somebody of adultery and you committing adultery? Come on. So let's go there anyway. Whereas disregard and contempt for human rights have resulted in various acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind, and the advent of a world in which human beings should enjoy freedom, listen, freedom of speech and belief and freedom from fear and want has been proclaimed as the highest aspiration of the common people. whereas it is essential if man is not to be compelled to have recourse as a last resort to rebellion, because that's the last resort, against tyranny and oppression, that human rights should be protected by the rule of law. And Britain signed this, right? They're one of the signatory members, right? So let's go through. I'm just going to read the important ones. Right, Article 3. Show you. So this is the original one. The one I read to you before was the one the Europeans did, which is more coded and less clear. Article 3. Everyone has a right to life, liberty, and security of person. So that's a right. Article 4. No one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms. Right? Article 5. No one shall be subjected to degrading treatment or punishment. So when you detain a Jake on the road and you, well, not strip search them, but you search them and you grab them up and you do that and all of that, and then afterwards it has been proven that the Jake is innocent, you've degraded, that's degrading treatment. You're not treating them as a human being. You're treating them as a person that has no rights. Yeah, so that's a breach. Everyone has a right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. Right? So because the Most High is not a respecter of persons, you see it there? Alright, come on. Article 8. Oh wait, let me show you first. And everybody download this as well. Because you need a copy of this, the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights 1948. You need a copy of this, the European Convention on Human Rights. You need a copy of it. Right? You can't be walking around blind thinking that you know. You need to know. Properly know. Article 7. All are equal before the law, according to them. Article 8. Everyone has a right to an effective remedy. So an effective remedy actually is a legal concept that doesn't exist, because how can you remedy 400 years of slavery, the removal of the history prior to that 400 years, the removal of a language, removal of a person's name, removal of a person's nationality, removal of a person's language, not to mention assets, land, so on and so forth? You can't remedy that. So this concept, this alludes to what we always say, which is what is the meaning, what does justice look like? We know that's in Numbers 35. Let me get that, what justice looks like. I don't know it off by heart, but I could find it, so let me just find it. Yeah, 35 verses 33 and 34. So let me just read that one, because it's not going to be much precept, but let me just bring this one. This is the book of Numbers, chapter 35, verses 33 and 34. Verse 33. So ye shall not pollute the land wherein you are, for blood it defileth the land. So we all know that they came, they saw, and they conquered, right? And the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed therein, but by the blood of him that shed it. Right? So in other words, an eye for an eye. If you shed blood, the person that shed the blood, his blood has to be shed. Listen to this, verse 34. Defile not therefore the land which ye shall inhabit, wherein I dwell, for I the Lord dwell among the children of Israel. Yep. So that's what justice looks like. Right? If you shed blood, your blood has to be shed. But that's effective remedy, and it will be effective, trust me. Article 9, listen to this. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile. So arbitrary means it's not according to law. So this is what happened to my brothers in Rock of Yahushua. They were arbitrarily detained. Why? Because they didn't have a subpoena, they didn't have a warrant, they were not servicing a court order to detain them. None of that was the case. They trailed them and stopped them and deprive them of their right to express their religion, express their understanding of the scriptures, right to family, because Ak was there with his sons, right? So all of that they did, which in my opinion, they should have been arrested. Article 10, everyone is entitled in full equality, right? They weren't treated as equal, in the determination of his rights and obligations and of any criminal charge against him. No one shall be held guilty of any penal offense on account of any act or omission. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference. So that's what they did as well. So Article 12 and Article 9 was human rights violations committed by the police, and it's on record, right? Because I seen the whole thing, and a lot of people saw it. So that was basically human rights violations because they breached a brother's rights to practice his religion, to express his opinion freely, to associate, and also to family, because that's also a right, because he was with his family as well. Article 13. Right, Article 13, everyone has a right to freedom of movement. So what people don't understand about this, it also applies to when you've been so-called detained. They use the word detained, but actually you're arrested. But they don't use the word arrest. But you're actually arrested, because when they stop you and they start to question you, you can't just walk off, right? But the point is, if you have the right to freedom of movement and they haven't charged you with everything, you are supposed to be able to walk off. And if you can't, that means that they've arrested you. And if they've arrested you, then they have an obligation to charge you, but they don't. So that's a breach of your human rights as well. Let me see anything else. I'm going through, because I'm only going to do the one. Here we go. Article 18. Right. So if you have these documents and you quote the articles, you're not going to stop them from doing what they're doing, because as I said, laws have been suspended. So it's just again, it's like a movie. They're acting out roles because they don't want the people to realize what it is going on and the country turn into a chaos, because they actually can. So what they do, they create an illusion of law and create an illusion of order, which we know order of chaos, but actually it is deceptive. It is a fabrication, because there is no law. What there is emergency powers, and that's what they're exercising. And that's why you can't hold them to account for all these breaches of human rights violations that they're doing, because there is no law. Law's been suspended. That's the point I'm trying to get across. Article 18. Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This includes freedom to change his religion. I used to be a Christian at one point in time, many years ago. I changed my religion. I had a belief. I thought I was African American. I changed that belief. Either alone, I was on my ones, and now I'm a member of a group. Malaakiam Shal Yahweh. I said it in Paleo Hebrew. Yahweh's messengers. Or in a community. That's my community. With others, listen to this, in public. I'm on the roads pushing the word. My brothers were in the word. I can't remember the area that they push it in, because I've never been down there. But they were on the road pushing the word, right? In public or in private, right? To manifest his religion or belief. Man, this is the one, Article 18. So you don't need to memorize Article 18 and quote it, right? Not that it's going to stop them, because like I said, there is no law, but quote it, because when they realize you understand what's going on, they will deal with you differently. But you have to comply. You can't be resisting, verbally or physically, because that's the trap. They would use that against you, and you could end up. Well, it's all Yahweh's will anyway, but you could end up in the worst case scenario as well. Article 19. So this links with 18. So this we should memorize this. Article 18 and Article 19. Let me read it for you. Everyone has a right to freedom of opinion and expression. So my opinion, which I know to be true, but my opinion is the Hathawara Watanak is real, and anything other than that is iffy, right? Whether it be a book, wherever, it's iffy. So that's my yardstick. That's my opinion. I know it to be true, but that's my opinion. This right includes freedom to hold opinions. So I've got the freedom to do that without interference. Article 18 and 19 Israel of the Human Rights Declaration of Human Rights 1948. Remember that. Without interference, and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. Look, this is the one. These two, because this is, like I said, it's not gonna. Our protection is Yahweh Shem Yahushai Wa Raka Kadash. That's plus the angels that encamp around us. That's our protection. So we rely on that through faith. But we also have to act in accordance to the fact that we're in captivity. So when we're interacting with Hakawayam, Wa Abyabyam Nawa, right? Hanasayam, deceivers, right? When we're dealing with them, we have to be able to speak their language, not just speak English, but speak their language, which is legal terminology, right? Article 20. So Article 18, Article 19, Article 20. Remember those. So let me read it out for you. Everyone has the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. We're peaceful. We're peacefully assembling. Why? Because we have the freedom of opinion and expression, right, to receive and impart information and ideas through any media, regardless of frontiers. So that could be on the street, that could be in the hedges. We have the legal right to do that. But I'm not saying that they're not gonna do what they're gonna do, because they have, we have our big brother, they have their big brother, and their big brother is a different kind of guy. Our big brother is our savior, our redeemer. Uh, right. So I think that's about it. There's something else I want to pull up. Let's see. Yeah. Is that it? Oh, just check. Make sure there's nothing else. Right. So this is the offshoot, but it's also important because what they tend to do with our children as well is they tend to force and impose Esau's understanding onto our children, right? So that's also a breach of our human rights as well. So I'm going to read it out. Article 26. Everyone has the right to education. Education shall be free. Right? And then they go further on to say higher education shall be equally accessible to all on the basis of merit. Right? 2. Education shall be directed. So they've already put a code word here. But education shouldn't be directed. Education should be the truth and nothing but the truth. Because you're supposed to be teaching the children the truth of how they should grow up. But here what it says here, education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality. What's a human personality? In the world we're living in, it's to do wrong. That's why the scripture says, I am to obey Yahweh rather than men, and to the strengthening of respect for human rights. Well, if that's the case, it ain't work because they didn't put this in the schools. So if this is the case, it's not working. Well, listen to this. This is the important point. So I'm going to highlight it again. This. So this is Article 26, and that's the number there. Parents have a prior right. So prior, what prior means is that you have a pre-existing right. So which means your right as a parent comes first. Prior means that would be like Yahweh Shai Hamashiach. So prior would be Alpha, the beginning, but the Most High, He's the Ancient of Days. He doesn't have a beginning. So you could change prior to beginning or original right. So your right supposed to supersede anybody else's right. So as a parent, if you tell your teacher, look, I do not want my child to be taught this gender business or this you could be any gender you want, or you could do any kind of bug out thing you want. If you speak to your teacher and say, look, do not teach my child that, you have the legal human right to do that. They're breaching your human right by teaching your children that without your consent. In case you don't know, that is a human rights violation. They're violating your right as a parent. Right. Right, so I put a note after Article 30, which is the last one. So take a look at the note, and then I'm going to read it out. Right. Article 30. Nothing in this declaration may be interpreted as implying for any state, group, or person any rights to engage in any activity or perform any act aimed, listen to this, at the destruction of any of the rights and freedoms set forth within. So whoever signed this document, or whoever were the signatories of this document, right? Who, by the way, were the same people that founded the UN, and by the way, are the same people that have what you call the power of veto, which would be Britain, France, America, China, and Russia, right? So they're the five nations with the power of veto, and then the other nations that were part of the organization when it was first formed. They all signed. America signed, not fully signed. They didn't fully ratify it, but they, in agreement, they signed in, how to put it, in theory. They said, yes, in theory we agree. But the other nations, they signed it, right? So let me read it now. The notes that I have. Any breaches of these articles listed in these pages as the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights 1948, any breaches meaning any transgression or any break, I like the word transgression, is counted as a human rights violation, right? That's a serious one. When somebody says you're a human rights violator, it's a serious, not even accusation, it's a statement of fact. Notice to principal is notice to agent. So this term here is because I had this quite a while. So there was a time when I was studying common law. So there was a movement at the time where people would study law and they would be able to defend certain actions against them based on their knowledge of the law. But I moved on from that. Why? Because there is no law. And because we are in captivity, so it doesn't matter what knowledge you have, if it's not based on the Hatorah, Wa, Hatanak, it ain't gonna work. Because when you go in a court, you've actually suspended your rights as a sovereign national person, and you've actually placed yourself under the jurisdiction of the law of admiralty, or the law of a superior over inferior. Because the minute somebody's judging you, they're in a superior position. That's why our judge is the Most High. Yahushua might be my judge. He might judge me. Why? Because he's my superior. Because the order is listed out: Yahweh, Yahushua, man, woman, and child. And actually, the elder child also has power over the younger children as well. That's the order. So he can judge me. He's got the power and the authority to judge me, right? But these Calabian, how can they judge me when they're Gawaiian? They don't follow the law. How can they? But they have the power. It is what it is, right? So I've read the European Convention on Human Rights. I've read the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I'm going to read this. So this is also something that every citizen of this country has the right to demand of an officer. Now, bearing in mind, all the rights that we have as citizens, allegedly, have been suspended. So actually, we do not have rights. Nobody has rights. It's been suspended. But they're not declaring that they've suspended it. Why? Because they want the masses to remain subservient and complacent. They don't want to wake up the sleeping tiger or the sleeping lion. So that's why they're just letting everything run as it is. So anyway, let me just read it out. This is something you can demand. Well, you can't because there's no law. But when law is reinstituted, if it ever is, because apparently they don't want to bring it back, but when it is reinstituted, you have the right to demand that a police officer recite the oath, which is called the attestation, right? Why? Because the oath, within the oath, it states that they have to uphold fundamental human rights, which is what I read. So if they read this and then you pull out this, you've got them in a trick bag. Because reading this, which is what they have to swear to be able to perform as police officers, and they have to place their hand on the Bible as well, King James Version Bible as well. So when they read, let me read it out for you. So this, you allegedly have the right to command any officer to recite. So let me read it. I, the person's name of the police department that they're attached to, do solemnly and sincerely declare and affirm that I will well and truly serve the Queen. Now, bearing in mind, the Queen, her Kalabwa, has passed away. Right, rest in pieces. So her son, funnily enough, her son is named after two James, right? King James King Charles the Second and King Charles the Third, I believe, or first and second. Yeah, King Charles the First, Black Boy and Blackbird, right? So he's named after them, right? One of them is in what's that cathedral that the brothers then went to? Can't remember the name, but the last lesson I did, I showed the image of him, right? So anyway, be that as it may, serve the Queen, serve the King, because, well, I didn't want to call him King, but whatever, in the office of constable with fairness, integrity, diligence, and impartiality, upholding fundamental human rights. So the minute they say this, and then you pull these out, or you recite the articles, so in the case of United Nations Declaration of Human Rights 1948, there would be articles 18, 19, and 20. You recite that, because remember they've got a camera, and plus when we're pushing a word, we're usually filming it as well. You will have them in a trick bag, right? Yeah, fundamental human rights and according equal respect to all people, which they don't do, and that I will, to the best of my power, and they don't do anything to the best of their power, cause the peace to be kept They don't do that. And preserve and prevent all offences against people and property. How come that doesn't apply to us? And that while I continue to hold the said office, I will, to the best of my skill and knowledge, listen to this, discharge all the duties thereof faithfully according to the law. They breached the law. So anyway, what I want to show you now, what I want to show you is show you how the American Constitution lines up with what I read in the European Convention on Human Rights and also the Declaration of Human Rights. So I'm going to read it to you because it's also coded as well. Right. So the last time I read it for you, I broke down where the 3/5 of a human being was coded, so you can't just look at it and really understand what it's saying. So now let me get Amendment 13, I think it is, the 13th Amendment. It's cited as the 13th Amendment, but it's actually Amendment 13. Right, so let me show you. So this is just proving that all of the laws and acts, the demonite laws and acts, are one and the same. There's no difference. Right, so let me read it out. 13th Amendment, which was ratified in 1865, which is basically around the time, so they say, slavery was abolished. Listen to this. Section 1. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, I explained that in the other documents, except as a punishment for crime. So this one's actually more clear. Except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party, the person involved, shall have been duly convicted. So it's the same wordology as that. So in other words, the person has to be taken into trial by a jury of his peers. I define what my peers are. I use myself as an example. So if I went to a court and there wasn't 12 people in the jury that were Jakes, then they have to be Jakes, number one. There can't be no next Moabite or Edomite, because that's not my peer. They have to be Jakes. They have to be about my age, because if they're not my age, they are not my peer. If you're 10 years younger than me, 20 years younger than me, you're not my peer. You might be my elder in the truth. I'll allocate you that respect, but you're not my peer. Because when you was a seed, I was still existing. I was on this earth. So you can't be my peer. You have to have my same educational background. If you don't have my educational background, I'm not trying to boast or anything, but if you do not have my educational background, you are not my peer. Because peer just means equivalent. If you're not in the truth, you're not my peer. So you have to get 12 jurors in the truth, my age, right? So forget educational background, because if they're the truth, that's enough for me, right? So you have to be my age, you have to be in the truth, right? You have to be a Jake to be in the truth anyway, and you have to also have lived in 3 continents. Because if you haven't lived in 3 continents, you don't have the same life experience I have. You can't judge me. You can judge me based on right and wrong, but you can't judge me on the other nuances. Right? Because that's the concept they come under. Our concept is more easier than that, because our concept is to the word, to the laws, statutes, and commandments, to the testimony, to the prophets. In other words, the scriptures. So that's what we use as a yardstick. But what they use, they try to bypass that and come with this a jury of your peers. But they don't define what a peer is. But it's easy to get the definition of a peer, because when you go into Westminster, the Houses of Parliament, there's a section there that don't get voted in. They're called peers, and their place in the Houses of Parliament is for life, right? They don't get voted in or out, and they're peers. And guess what? They're all knights. They're all not knights, lords. So they call them lords as well. They're all equivalent. So that's what pairs mean, right? So yeah, let me get back to it, because I went in a rant. So let me go back. Section 1, Section 1 of the 13th Amendment, 1865. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the person involved, shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction, which at this time would have been Puerto Rico as well, and maybe, I'm not sure, maybe Hawaii as well, maybe not, right? Yeah, so that's it. So basically, the next lesson I'm going to get into the bill that everybody's talking about. But the reason why I got into this is because it's been on my mind. I've even spoken to some of the brothers in my camp about it. We have to do better, Israel. We have to be examples. And to be an example also means that when the Gawaiians come at us, we have to be able to deal with it as men of the Lord would deal with certain situations. So yeah, it's good to have faith. It's good to rely on Yahweh Hashem Yahushai to put the words into our hearts, our mind, to speak. But we also have to study to show ourselves approved. And we also have to be able to approach the demonites in a professional way. Let's use that. Not a professional way, but with all decency and decorum and order. Because we're commanded to do that, right? So if the feds come, which they will, right, and they start making demands, which they will, we pull out debt. Well, actually, we can't really do anything because, like I said, it's a state of emergency. But in theory, you have the right to question them. You have the right to a fair hearing, and you have the right to express your religion, your opinion, freedom of movement. So anyway, that's a lesson for today. The next one's going to be based on the bill that everybody's talking about, because I looked through it, I downloaded it, I looked through it, and to be quite honest, the way that people are viewing it, there's a twist to it, right? There's a twist to it, and a lot of people are just looking at it at face value, but there's a twist to it. So I want to get into that as well. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. So I'm going to give all honors and praises to Yahweh, Wahasham, Yahweh Shai, Waha, Waka, Kadash, Kalhalaliam, Wakabadiam, Wapalaliam, Yahweh, Alashadiam, Amalak, Hamashiach, Yahweh Shai, Brakata Yahweh, Brakata Yahweh Shai, Brakata Yahweh, Brakata Yahweh Shai. Sawada Yahweh, Sawada Yahweh Shai, Sawada Yahweh, Sawada Yahweh Shai, and Yahweh Yahweh, and Yahweh Yahweh Shai. And one other thing I want to do, right? So this is the most quoted verse, I believe, Hebrew verse, I believe. So I'm going to just quote it. That's what they say. So I'm going to quote it. Shamai Yasha'ala, Yahweh, Alahayanawa, Yahweh, Akkad. And what that means is, listen, O Israel, Yahweh, our power, is one. Yeah? It's not no Trinity, it's one. And with that, I like to say,